Welcome to the Q Podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
And God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding, his church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
Hello, I'm Gabe Lyons. Welcome back to the Q Podcast. It is great to just keep these conversations going. I know so many of you have been with us for several weeks just listening in on a pretty intense conversation and learning. And with me for most of that was the gentleman who's with me again today, Preston Sprinkle. Preston, welcome back to the Q Podcast.
It is so great to be back, Gabe. Thanks for having me on, man.
So the premise of our conversation today is we're taking a little bit of a different direction. I invited Preston to come out to our next Q conference, which is taking place in Denver, April 21st to 23rd. And I invited him, as I do with at least 30 other presenters, to come and specifically engage a topic for us at Q. And you might be surprised to know the topic has nothing to do with sexuality. In fact, it's a completely different topic, but one that Preston's equally passionate about and has done a lot of work on, and it's the topic of nonviolence and the whole concept of how do Christians think about our responsibility as it relates to guns and crime and violence and how we engage those that maybe we disagree with. So Preston, I'm excited that you're going to be with us and talking about this topic. Tell us a little bit about why this topic matters to you.
Oh man, Gabe, yeah, I'm going to be talking about nonviolence, and this is a really strange topic for me. I was not raised in a sort of pacifistic, nonviolent culture at all. My family wasn't nonviolent. I was raised in a military family. Even to this day, I hunt. I mean, we've been hunting together, Gabe. I own guns. And so I don't have any sort of political, emotional aversion of violence. But here's what's striking to me is I do believe that Jesus and his followers in the New Testament were committed to a nonviolent ethic. And that when I discovered that a few years ago, it just really rocked me and caused me to rethink this whole issue of violence. And obviously, when you look around the news today, it just seems like violence is everywhere. Every time I turn on the news, there's gun violence everywhere. And so I'm trying to figure out, how does my Christian perspective about nonviolence, how can I bring that to bear on a very violent culture? And so that's what I'm going to be addressing at Q in Denver this April. And Gabe, if I'm totally honest, I'm really nervous because I think
don't be. I mean, listen, Preston, that's what I love is stepping into it. That's part of how we think about Q. We invite presenters and really commission a talk for them to go after to educate this audience about how to think well about that. And of course, your perspective isn't going to be the only one presented. You are going to be challenged by someone else that will be sharing why owning a gun is a virtue of a civil society. So that's the fun of Q, and I'm excited that you're going to be with us and looking forward to talking a little bit more about what people can expect.
So, Gabe, I'm looking at all these topics that are going to be addressed at Q Denver. I mean, you've got conversations about gender dysphoria, euthanasia, marijuana. You're going to be talking about marijuana.
You can't go to Denver and not talk about marijuana. I mean, this is the place that legalized it 3 years ago. It's a topic you just can't put down, if you're in the city.
So it sounds like, Q is a place where you're just going to dive into the most controversial, hottest topics that live at the intersection of faith and culture. Is that a good way to describe Q, or what's your sort of main mission in doing this?
Well, I think when we began this 10 years ago, and that's what's fun about this particular year, it's our 10-year anniversary it's the 10th Q. And Q stands for questions, right? We're trying to ask these questions around some of these really difficult topics. There's not always easy answers to them. We don't want to just give answers at our event. We just don't want to tell people, hey, here's exactly how you have to think. We really trust our audience, everybody participating, that they are thoughtful. They are understanding and trying to work out their faith and what does that look like in our world today. But if we can inform them with like good information and hear stories of people who are engaging this on the front lines, or experts, who have thought about this, who've done the research, who've done the work to inform a very busy leader in our culture in any place in our society. It's not just pastors, but it's business leaders. It's people working in media and education at our universities and colleges. It's people who lead high schools and elementary schools. It's teachers. It's people in social work. The gamut is represented at Q of people who are trying to serve what God might be trying to do in the world, but in every kind of channel. And it's not only about controversial issues. I mean, those are the ones that tend to get the press, right? They're the ones that people, highlight, or when the news is and the media is talking about Q, they tend to focus on a few of these that are the most controversial. But when we think through this, we're thinking, what does it mean for a person who's following Christ, who cares and knows that we have a role as Christians to engage our culture? What are some of the things we need to be discussing in 2016 so that over the next 12 months we're prepared? And so some of our topics are very much dealing with a theological outlook. What does it mean as a church leader, a Christian, to think well about a culture, to think well about secularism, what's happening in our institutions, what's happening in our government, the presidential election, things that just everybody's talking about, but we want to make sure Christians are able to think through, how does the gospel affect how I'm thinking about it?
Yeah, that's super helpful, Gabe. So just to back up a little bit, who is Q for? Like when you look out at the audience, like what types of people do you expect to be there? Sitting in the audience, are these pastors? Are these scholars? Are these intellectuals? Or who are the types of people you want to gather at these meetings?
Well, it's all of the above, plus people who haven't thought a lot about these things, but they know they're important, and they don't really, as Christians, have a place that they can go to get some of this learning, or to not show up and have all the answers. I mean, a lot of pastors today and people leading churches, their people assume they know what to do. They just assume they know how to engage the most contentious conversations of our time, and yet many of them don't. I mean, the research shows that many of them just do not know how to engage some of this, how to do it with the right language and tone. So this becomes a place where it gets modeled for them. They get to just sort of sit in a room and not have all the answers and ask the questions that maybe the people around them would normally think were silly or that they should have an answer to, and they don't have to have those answers. So that's one thing I would say. But secondly, when we began Q 10 years ago, the whole point was, I was leading something called Catalyst at the time, a conference that's focused very much on church leaders and leadership. And the thing I was realizing was many of these leaders are learning about leadership, but we're not talking about the questions that they're really going to be confronted with in the years ahead. We're not talking about what our culture's doing right now, where it's going. If you look at the trend lines, secularism, you look at the way people have a disdain for religion and Christianity and the church, you see all these things starting to bubble up in 2007, 8, 9, 12, and now it's starting to play out. And so what we've been doing for 10 years is trying to look forward and say, how do we prepare the church for the days ahead? And the church I speak of is broadly, it's the capital C church. That's all of us. It's Christians who feel like they're supposed to be a part of partnering with God for what he's trying to do in the world. And so Q becomes a place where that doesn't just become some meta idea where we just talk about theology and talk about 30,000 foot level ideas. No, it's going to get applied to the here and now. It's going to get applied to things like marijuana. It's going to get applied to euthanasia and the kind of things that our culture right now is debating and thinking about. How are we as Christians going to engage those things? And so year after year, we've taken Q to a new city. So we began in Atlanta. The next year we went to New York. And then after that, we went to Austin, Texas. We've been to Los Angeles. We've been to Washington, D.C. This past year, we were in Boston. And so every year for 10 years now, we've taken it to a new city, a little bit of a different region of the country, and we've let that be our backdrop. And so we try to create Q as not only a place where you're hearing a lot of content, but you're actually doing two other things. You're meeting people who probably in their fields, they're some of the people that if you have a question about a certain topic, they're the ones who have the answers. They've either written the book on it or they've thought a lot about it. And so there's a number of people there who are very educated, who are intellectuals, who are people who are experts in things, either because of their experience or their knowledge. But there's also people there who aren't experts, who are saying, I just want to be around this conversation. I'm hungry for this, and I don't know where else I can get it. And the second thing is, so you're going to meet great people, but you're going to experience the city of Denver. Like we do this downtown. It's not located in a church. We're at the Paramount Theater right downtown, a 100-year-old theater that's just beautiful. The stories it could tell about culture are amazing. And our hotel's right next to the venue. And so people get out in the restaurants and the city scene. They get to enjoy a wonderful experience as well as learn. And so we find the people that come back year after year go, man, we love this because we met people that now have become partners in what we're trying to do. We've built friendships. And so for the future, Q just is a staple on a place I'm going to prioritize and invest in.
I'm curious about the format. As I look at these different topics, and obviously they're highly controversial. You have really smart people on both sides or all sides of these debates. Is Q? I mean, would you describe it as a debate, a dialogue? Are there people on different sides of these issues that are going to be presenting? Like, what do people expect when they come to these events?
On some of these topics, yes, there are two different sides on an issue, and you're trying to have a conversation. It is not a debate, though. We do not create an environment where it's kind of toxic, and people are going after each other. It's not like that at all. In fact, we're trying to model what does civil and respectful dialogue look like in a culture that's forgotten that. And so we really practice true tolerance. We really create an environment where even if you absolutely disagree with someone, and in this case for you, I mean, you're going to be speaking on nonviolence, and there will be a presentation probably right before yours, of someone advocating for guns. And so following that, we're going to take a moment, and you two are going to sit together, and I'm going to moderate Q&A with the entire audience. And so we're basically going to give the whole audience the opportunity to raise their hand, to ask a question, to put the mic in their hand and let them ask you a tough question, or ask the person who presented the other point of view a tough question, and then let them hear your answer. And so in that sense, I think what you're going to find about it, Preston, because you're so good at this anyway, is that you're going to love just being in a space where it doesn't feel toxic to disagree with people. It feels like there's a respect and an intent and a value for friendship and relationship that can supersede disagreement on certain values and ideas. And I think in the church, there's a lot of people hungry to see that, and a lot of pastors who in their heart want to lead that way, but they don't quite know how. And I think we hear stories all the time of people going, you've helped us start to imagine how we're going to do that back in our own community and our own church.
Well, I mean, it sounds like there will be an opportunity. Am I right? The people that come to Q can talk with and relate with and actually get to know some of the speakers. I mean, I've been to these conferences where it's like, gosh, you're sitting in the crowd and out comes the speaker, he gives his delivery, and then back he goes, and you literally never see him again. And personally, when I go speak at conferences, my favorite, I mean, as much as I like being on stage and talking, like my favorite time is after it's done to come down and talk to the people. Like, I want to know, what are you thinking? What resonated? What questions do you have? Like, I actually love that. I mean, does Q have space to actually engage on a more relational level with the speakers?
Yeah, in fact, we don't have a green room, Preston, which is, I know, a shock to people who go to Christian conferences, I guess. But when we created this event, I mean, I'm the kind of guy, I don't like going to conferences personally. Like I don't enjoy conferences. I really haven't enjoyed going to conferences for a long time. And so when we created Q, we kind of had that in mind and said, look, busy people, leaders, and people who have a lot going on, they're not necessarily interested in sitting in an audience and just hearing somebody speak platitudes to them for 45-minute talks, and then not getting to interact much. So we designed the whole model around letting people engage and hear 9-minute talks, 18-minute talks. We time the talks. We put the clock up so that the attendee, the participants, in control of that clock. They see what the speaker sees, and when the time's up, the time's up. And so our presenters really respect that clock and respect the audience, and it allows you as the attendee to get to hear all kinds of ideas. This year we've introduced this new format. We're on 8 different topics, and the gun question, gun control, that discussion is one that you'll be participating in. We are going to have 2 different talks given around that particular theme, and then we're going to open it up to the entire audience of 1,400 leaders sitting in the Paramount Theater to be able to respond, to ask questions, and to engage with you in front of the entire crowd, because we have found the Q&A portions sometimes of events or workshops or when you're speaking, that's where you kind of get into the nitty-gritty and you get to hear some of the pushback, and we want that to be a total experience for everyone. Some of our talks, we will not have that Q&A opportunity happen on stage, but like you said, our presenters, they sit there in the front row or at a table nearby the stage, and we invite them up. We don't try to create sort of two different worlds where the speakers are hanging out and the attendees. We think most of our attendees, if we gave them the mic, they could probably deliver a pretty compelling 9-minute talk about the work they've been doing. And so I think that's generally how it feels. And we don't create like a big exhibitor space and things like that. I mean, we basically want the action to be people meeting one another, going out to long dinners and lunches and hanging out at after parties afterwards and building friendships while they're being engaged with some of the best thinking and being pushed as Christians to sort of consider where do they fall when they hear some of these thoughts and ideas.
So I heard that the speaker is given an ankle bracelet, and if they go over 18 minutes, that you actually shock them, like you give them is that? We've had a couple times where a presenter has gone over a little too long, but that ends up, I just walk up on stage and stand beside them, and then they pretty much conclude. But no, we've had some of the most verbose, I would say, speakers fall into the time crunch there and get it done. So I think as long as you don't go over, see if you go over, then I'm going to have a real problem. So you just make sure you've practiced before you get up there and give your talk. It'll be my last Q talk ever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, this has been actually super helpful. And honestly, I mean, I've gotten to know Q over the last year, really, as we've gotten to know each other. So this is actually super enlightening and helpful for me, and I hope it is for people listening.
Yeah, well, and the other thing, too, about this is like our first night, and this is what would be fun to know, like, what would you do on this first night? We do these things called city experiences where, every attendee chooses from 5 different opportunities. Like, for one, we're having Darling Magazine, if you've ever heard of them. They do just amazing work, but we're creating this, like, Darling dinner, a farm-to-table dinner that people can choose to go to. It's going to be a full experience. There's going to be a film screening, so we have a film that's not released yet that people can choose to go to a screening and meet some of the people who are part of that film. There's also a Praxis Entrepreneur Night. So that's a night where we partner with Praxis, a group that we helped co-found, and we actually do a business plan competition where you get to hear 12 different entrepreneurs. 6 are for-profit founders, 6 are nonprofit founders. They give 5-minute talks where they're pitching you on their organization, and you in the audience get to decide, hey, where would I put money if I was a venture capitalist? What would I invest my money in? And whoever wins that night gets to present on the Q stage to everyone the next morning. So that's kind of fun. And then we're going to have like a private concert where we got a special band. I can't reveal who that is right now. That'll be coming out very soon. But they're going to be doing a private show. So you basically get to choose from one. So Preston, which one of those would you go to?
Well, I got to reveal to everybody that private concert is actually me. I'm going to be rapping for everybody.
I think I would pay to see that, actually.
I might get a divorce if I did that. That concert sounds awesome, especially since you I mean, from what I know about
who it is.
From what I know about you and Q is that you guys really do appreciate high quality work. I mean, I've seen that in the stuff you've done, in the talks that you guys have hosted and given. Like, you really want high quality stuff. So when you say there's going to be a private concert, I know, maybe it's not my favorite genre of music, maybe it's not my favorite band, whatever, but I know it's going to be a high quality concert. I'm going to pick that one. That's
all right. Cool. No, it will be. And at the Paramount Theater, I mean, you can't get a better place, a better venue where you could hear music live and actually get to interact with the artist and hear some of their thoughts. Not just like a concert, but actually getting to hear from somebody who's playing a role in culture, who's having to think through a lot of the topics we're thinking about and apply it to their craft. So it creates a pretty great evening. And then the other thing we do, and this Saturday morning of this event from 9 to noon, we create something called learning communities. And this has been one of the popular things with Q since the beginning, where we essentially give people all kinds of opportunities to explore either something a little more fun, recreational, experiential, where they can just get out in the city, but get together with like a cohort of people who care about that sort of thing. So, I mean, we're talking about everything from a walk in the city with architectural experts to describe how this city was planned, what's happening in the community, like, and just talk in that way, all the way to like a writer's workshop, like for people who are looking to write their first book. This is going to be a place where they understand what goes into it. There's going to be hiking, fly fishing, which I know you're a big fan of, rock climbing. And then there's also, though, some like deeper dive opportunities for people to learn more. So like we're talking about with David Kinnaman, why are millennials leaving the church. We're going to talk about sexual identity. We're going to have conversations about what does it look like for us to engage our cities and create city movements. And so there's going to be a combination of those things. So I don't know. Maybe I will ask you, like, which one are you thinking?
The one I really want to go to, you didn't mention.
Which one's that?
Well, you're putting on a craft beer tour on Saturday morning. Is that? I want to go hang out with that crowd because I love craft beer, and anybody that wants to go on a craft beer tour on Saturday morning has got to be tons of fun.
Well, if you want to understand Denver, you do have to kind of understand the beer scene that's developed there over the years, and so there's some pretty cool things. For people who get into that, they're going to be an opportunity to do that.
So, Gabe, I'm curious, what other presenters do you have coming in? I would love to hear, the different speakers you've enlisted to cover these topics.
Well, we have over 30 presenters, and people can go to qideas.org/Denver. There's a lot of information there, from topics and themes to one big question we ask. So, like, for example, one of my favorites, Kevin Kelly. He's co-founder of Wired Magazine, a futurist, and he's going to be talking about, now check this topic out, Preston. It's about artificial intelligence, and the question he's answering, can we teach robots to be ethical and spiritual? So I know a lot of people aren't sitting around thinking about that. Well, this guy thinks about that all the time. He understands what's happening with Google and how when they create these automatically driving cars, they're literally having to make ethical decisions. So, for example, when the car's pulling up and it sees a mother with a child walking across the street, does it avoid that and crash? And that way the person in the car is actually the one that could potentially get hurt, but they avoid the mother walking across the street with the child. I mean, ethical decisions that robots are making. Now, I know most of us don't sit around and think about that, but that is cool. That's interesting. And Kelly Clark, right? Olympic gold medalist, X Games. She's the most awarded, decorated performer in the X Games and the Olympics for snowboarding amongst men and women. She's going to be talking about her faith and how much it's like informed the way she thinks about her calling, the work that she's doing. But we also will have things like, for example, Ted Trempa, somebody who's a leader in the gay rights movement, who's done a lot of work on that front, sitting alongside Jim Daly, the president of Focus on the Family. Now, why would I have these two gentlemen sitting alongside one another? Well, the reason is they both live in Colorado, and they found a way to come together and work on sex trafficking law in their state that would help protect girls who were being trafficked, and to do something that was a common good activity where they had common ground, even if they have different politics, even if they have different value sets on which they're working on other things, they found common ground. We want to model that. And we're also dealing with race. I mean, this conversation and the question we'll be asking with Michelle Higgins is, do Black lives matter to evangelicals? I mean, these are the kind of things we want to engage. We want those of you listening to be a part of it. And so, Preston, I mean, there's so many of these topics. I would just encourage people to go to the website, qideas.org/Denver, and they can look at the topics, they can look at the speakers, experiences, and see all kinds of information.
That sounds awesome, Gabe. And what I love about this is that you're combining a lot of really thoughtful people with really important topics that everybody's wrestling with. And yet it's not so scholarly or intellectually over people's head. You've got people that know how to engage a crowd. They know how to communicate in a way that's understandable and engaging. And I'm super excited about Q Denver this year.
Well, thanks. And I think, Preston, the thing I want to just speak to, for those who are listening right now, this is a gathering for you. This isn't just for those who dig into these topics all the time. We created it for the person who doesn't have time to get into these topics. That's why we have 9-minute talks on really important things, because we want you to hear the best thinking on it, but quickly. We want you to be able to wrestle with these things and talk with others who are thinking about it. But for those of you who are listening to this podcast, you've been engaging with us. You kind of understand how deep these conversations go. You could spend hours on them, but this is meant to just give you a taste of where's our culture going. If we were to just look out over the next year, if we could predict the future, we think the topics we'll be talking about are ones with your children. If you're a parent, you need to be versed in with, maybe it's with your parents, maybe it's with your colleagues, maybe it's an organization that you're leading. Maybe it's that your organization is focused on helping engage millennials, or maybe it's that your church is really trying to figure out what does the next phase of church look like for us. Like, you're feeling this sense of lostness that many Christians in American life are starting to feel. Well, when you feel that pressure, Q's that place I think you can come and exhale. You can sit back with people who are like-minded, who care about these things, who don't have all the answers, but they're willing to explore them. You're willing to have some very honest conversations, and we want you to come out. And so one of the things we're doing, just for those of you listening to this, is giving you a special discount. You're going to get 15% off. If it's your first time coming to Q, we want you to register with us. We want you to use a promo code that just says podcast, and when you do that, you're going to get 15% off your registration, and you can do that again at qideas.org/Denver. And Preston, man, I am so excited for you to be there. I think you're going to meet so many great people that I've been wanting to introduce you to since we've known each other over this last year. But in addition to that, I think you'll be challenged too. I mean, I think we find our presenters show up and go, man, I've never sat in a room and listened to this kind of thing. And since we don't give you a nice green room to go sit back and sip on some water and eat M&Ms, you're kind of forced to sit there and listen.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I mean, I'm so excited to present at Q Denver. I think I'm almost more excited to be able to sit back and listen to all these conversations. I mean, there's several topics here and people that I've seen from afar, topics that I've have a desire to engage in, but I'm like, I don't know how to navigate these topics. I can't keep up with everything. So I'm super excited just to go and soak in these topics, but most of all, to just expand my thinking and relationships with people that are engaging in all these different areas.
Well, Preston, thanks for doing this conversation with us. I don't often get to describe a lot of what's behind Q, how we think about it, what's going on this particular year. So it's fun to tell you about it, and a byproduct of that is all of our listeners getting a chance to kind of see behind the scenes on kind of how we're thinking about it and what we're doing there. And so I hope all of you listening will take a chance with us, invest, come out, spend the time, block the time on your calendar. The event begins on a Thursday morning at 11 a.m. So for a lot of people, you can fly in that morning. It concludes Friday evening on the 22nd with a big party that we're going to be doing to celebrate our 10 years. And then Saturday morning is learning community. So you can come for as little or as long of that as you want, but we hope you'll join us. Looking forward to talking with you again on the next episode. Hey, this is Gabe, and if you've decided you're going to join us, remember to use the promo code podcast and go to qideas.org/Denver. And by the way, why don't you send this over to a friend, share this link, and let others in your community know what we're doing at Q and invite them to join you as well.